Anyways, so let's talk about some optimization here. First, I love this deck because this commander looks so elusively bad, it's beautiful. So for white and 3 colorless, we can pay 2 life and return Selenia to its owner's hand. It even has that wonderful text that it counts as an angel. Super old school commander, one of my favorites because again, it just doesn't seem good. But this pay 2 life, return it to its owner's hand, remember this, we have a commander where we can pay life. That's going to be good for what we want to do. But before we get into what we want to do, let's talk about some of the fun stuff that we got going on. So, this is from the gain a life side. This is stuff that we're going to gain life on. But we'll get into a little later of some of the stupid shenanigans that this gain of life stuff can be. In fact, this deck is better if we lose life. If we're gaining life, that's bad for our opponents usually. They would rather see the lose life cards come at them than see the gain life cards come at them. Because this actually can kill someone. There are several cards in this deck where you can turn this into a kill spell for 1 more mana. And it gets ridiculous. So there are a lot of ways to kill people for under 6 mana. I've counted this deck, and I won't talk about all the ways, but there's roughly about 120 different combos with different synergies of cards that you can use to kill people. Usually within the first couple turns of the game, I have a combo to kill people. It's just about getting there after that point. So let's talk about some of the fun cards we have in this deck. We have Boon Reflection, double someone's life total. Axe's Immortality, swap someone's life total. Vizkopa Guildmage, give something a lifelink. And then whenever I gain life, everybody loses that much life. Crypt Gas. The Extort is the important part here, but he does double our black mana. Fumigate. I gain life for every creature destroyed. Eternity Vessel. This thing is so much fun. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, when it enters, you put X charge counters on it, where X is your life total. When a land enters the battlefield in your control, you may have your life total become the number of charge counters on an Eternity Vessel. This thing is huge. When I'm playing against those red and blue decks that I was talking about that try to kill me, this is like the thing that I usually tutor for the first, because I need to get this on the field and make them remove it. Because this is the only way that I'm going to stay alive against the Storm deck. Ajani's Pridemate. Whenever I gain life, put a 1/1 counter. This card wasn't in my deck in the beginning. I put him in here. I swapped him out for, like, say, for I think a Vampiric Tutor. So when we talk about, like, you want more synergy in this deck, make it go faster, swap that dude out for a Vampiric Tutor. And this deck gets even more fun. Pristine Talisman. Get some mana, gain some life. Children of Corliss. You can sacrifice it and gain life equal to the life you've lost this turn. Cool thing, this is a turn 1 effect. You can absolutely play this turn 1, and if someone tries to combo off on like turn 2, turn 3, you don't have to tap him. You can easily just sack him and regain that life. Wall of Shards. This one's elusive. Its cumulative upkeep is an opponent gains a life. It's a 1/8 blocker. It's very good in the beginning, especially against CDH decks for their starting aggro. Most people don't remove it because they're gaining life playing against me. But again, there are cards in this deck that by the time this gets up to a cumulative total of like 5 to 6 age counters, this thing starts getting kind of deadly. Beacon of Immortality. Again, double someone's life total. Absolutely gross. Because again, can become a kill spell in this deck. Soul Conduit. Have 2 target players exchange life totals. Reverse the sands. Have people you can swap any number of life totals you want. And then Exquisite Archangel. If I would lose the game, exile it, and my life total becomes my starting life total again. Which is going to be a common theme. You're going to see, so we talked about that because when we get into some of the life loss stuff, you'll see where a lot of that stuff quickly becomes kill spells. Because we have a number of cards in here that say when I gain life, people lose life. So me gaining life is scary. Me having other people gain life is scary because depending on how I stack it, we can absolutely kill someone. Like I said, I'm playing a ton of mana, and I'm honestly playing about 10 to 15 rocks. So, yeah, we know that this deck's high CMC. That is the one drawback and why this is not a true CEDH deck, but it absolutely can contend. It has a lot of defenses against CEDH. So let's talk about some of the cool stuff this deck has for assistance on the gain of life side. Tainted Sigil. Kind of the same thing as that Corlos. It's a little bit of a weaker version because it's 3 mana and you have to tap and sack it, but you gain life equal to the total life lost by all players. This can send you above and beyond the other players because you can cause everyone to lose a lot of life. Use this Tainted Sigil and gain all the life lost by people. Near-death experience. We have a couple of different types of these. This one is an upkeep. If I have 1 life, we win the game. Know that there are ways in this deck that I can go to 1 life. Remember, we have a commander that can cause us to lose 2 life. And there are some other things that can cause us to lose 1 life. It is very quick to get us to this upkeep. So while this is on the stack, we can start sending ourselves to that stack so that if people do not have an answer for this, we will win the game on the go. Same thing here. We can actually drain ourselves out with Selenia, and in response, Angel's Grace to that last trigger so that we actually stay at 1 life. That right there is one, like, say, combo that we can actually get into. But Angel's Grace is another one of those, like, I don't want to lose the game yet. Let's go to 1 life total and nobody can kill me this turn. Test of Endurance. At the beginning of your upkeep, you have 50 or more. You win the game. I like this more than the Kitty, or whatever the hell that damn thing is. Because it's an enchantment. There's less artifact and enchant removal, so at the cost of being 10 higher life, I like Test a lot more. Good old Teferi's Protection, because there's nothing better than exiting the game after you put out a pretty much a kill everybody condition, or if you're in a spot again that you can't lose the game this turn and you just need to get to your untapped phase. Teferi's Protection is great. Grand Abolisher. Just make sure this is great against counter spells. So if I am playing a counter deck, this is another great card to go up against because it makes sure that anything I play during my turn is going to stick. Blind Obedience. Makes stuff come in tapped and has an extort trigger, which is beautiful. Phyrexian Unlife. This combos with a ton of cards in the deck. Being able to get myself to 0 life and life swap, redistribute life totals, be able to gain a little bit of life and then continue paying it, and basically being able to actually zero myself is really good. The important thing in here is that as long as you have 0 or less life, all damage is dealt to you as though its source had infect. It is worth saying, because of this clause, you can lose life, but it doesn't cause infect. So if someone drains you and it's a life loss effect, this does not deal infect. This is only does damage deal you infect, which is a very important distinction. Wall of Blood, pay a life. It gets +1/+1 till end of turn. And then Platinum Angel, which, yeah, that's always fun. This thing's a great way to remove somebody's creature. It doesn't seem good, but when you're going to take the 8 damage, and I've had a Paco game once, actually, where this card became a huge problem for that player. They didn't understand why I was paying life to blow up Paco. But the thing is like, Paco's going to deal damage to me either way, but I can kill people who are trying to Voltron me. I can kill people's creatures that are trying to Voltron me out, and I'm going to take the damage either way, but I'm not taking commander damage. And because I'm playing a life gain and life loss deck, I have no problem losing life. It does not matter to me. If you send me to 1 life, I'm going to trade it to you. And then you're going to be at 1 life, and I'm going to be at whatever obscene life total you're still sitting at. That's kind of the illusion of this deck, is that I'm not just playing with my life total, I'm also playing with yours. So sending this deck's life total down lower is actually very scary and a very bad thing to do against this deck. This deck you want to one-shot. You don't want to be twiddling me down, because if you give me chances to untap while I have 10 life, you're oftentimes going to get that 10 life. And then, of course, Platinum Angel, because why not lose the game? Let's talk about a removal package. Merciless Eviction, really great, fantastic. Slaughter Pact. You know, I've got it's just to destroy target non-black creature. It can't be regenerated. But the real key condition here is this is the buyback pay for life. I am more than happy to keep paying the buyback on this. Awesome removal spell. Forget my crappy alt art here. This was something I was trying. It is actually a Mortify. I left some of the card untouched so that people can actually see that it is his real card. Destroy target creature enchantment. Anguish Unmaking, always great. Cranial Archive to be able to get rid of somebody's graveyard when needed. And an Utter End. I don't play a ton of removal because I don't plan to let the games go that long, but it's a couple good pieces of spot removal that if I need to, again, tutor for them. Especially when I play this in my very high powered build where I'm playing Vampiric Tutors and all the cheap 1 to 2 drop tutors possible. Those removal spells get real spicy. So let's talk. Oops, got that backwards. Let's talk about our draw and talk about our draw package here. We got some classics: Ancient Craving, Skeletal Scrying, Well of Lost Dreams is a stellar one in here. Although oftentimes this is the one card I constantly go back and forth to taking out because sometimes I just don't like paying mana for it, but the life gain is very real. Foreboding Fruit is also very fun, and then the Read the Bones and Painful Lessons. For people that are talking about like wanting to play higher power, I see a lot of people try to go with like Phyrexian Arena or Underworld Connections. Stay away from those cards. Those cards are weaker. I will play Skeletal Scrying and Read the Bones and always see so much more profit off it than I'll ever see off Phyrexian Arena. Phyrexian Arena takes about 2 turns to actually see profit off of, and when you're playing something, you know, in the moment, you want to get your draw then. Playing a card that's not going to really net you draw until 2 turns later isn't really worth playing for the 3 mana. You know, when we're talking about paying 3 mana to draw 2 cards, Phyrexian Arena is 3 mana, and it takes 2 turns to draw the 2 additional cards. That 3 mana should net you right from the get-go. And just like here in black, even though we're losing life, we are always at base paying the 3, you know, mana to draw 2 cards. Same with Skeletal Scrying. Ancient Craving is for 4 mana for 3. Well of Lost Dreams is 1 mana to 1 card for every life gained. And then we have a couple other spicy ones. We have Necrologia. It's a pay X life, draw X cards. You can only play it during the discard phase. But again, if I'm going to say swap someone's life total with like Soul Conduit, and I want to give someone a low life total, I can actually play Necrologia before, right where that life swap is on the stack, drain my life down, draw a ton of cards, and give them the lower life total. Argyl's Bloodfast. You know, we can pay some life, draw a card, you know, 2 mana, pay 2 life, draw a card, that's cool. We can flip it. I don't even remember what it flips into because I never use it. I could sacrifice a creature, gain life equal to its toughness. Yeah, never going to use that. We basically want to keep this thing as Argyl's. So if you have 5 or less life, you may transform it. That's cool. Normally when we're 5 or less life, I'm giving that away to someone. And that's neat. So, and then again, here's one of those cards that's arguably one of the most powerful things in the deck. If I'm able to plant this, good chance I'm winning the game the next turn. This card should be in my win the game stack, but it's technically draw. If I hit this card, we're likely going to win the game. There's a good chance I'm going to be able to draw my deck out and be able to mold whatever hand I want, and whatever hand I do decide to mold, we're going to usually keep 2 or 3 win combos. So it is very much a, I hope you have a ton of removal because we are about to just absolutely go insane. I'll usually keep some form of recursion in there. Oftentimes, you know, like if I draw the Cranial Archive, that'll be a lifesaver for if I need to re-go through the deck again. But Necropotence is insane in here. The paying the life, especially if you have something like Phyrexian Arena online, or like a Platinum Angel at all. You know, this would be the bad example because it's the most expensive. But any of these effects that cause me to stay alive while being at 0 life, Necropotence is going to have fun with it all day. So let's talk about the lose life cards, which are a little bit fewer, but they're still really good. And some of my win condition cards are within this. But some of the random ones to lose life. We have False Cure. Until undetermined, whenever a player gains a life, that player loses 2 life for each life they gained. Works great with a lot of target player doubles their life total. Any of those can kill with False Cure. Hex Parasite is beautiful. Great killer for Planeswalkers. You can pay 2 life and remove it to X counters for target permanent for each counter removed this way. It gets +1/+0. Again, we can just pay 0 on the X and just pay 2 life all day and just absolutely just drain ourselves. But it also could kill a Planeswalker. It can remove counters off any commander that matters. And it's only 1 mana to put on the field. Absolutely fantastic card for this deck. We have Deadly Tempest, which is just another solid board wipe. You know, everybody losing life. I don't have that many creatures in this deck, so this usually will never affect me. We have Hatred. This thing is great with Selenia. This is another one of those just straight kill someone with Selenia. For 21 life, you know, no, not even that. For 18 life paid into this, Selenia can kill someone. I've only ever Hatreded 1 player out of the game. Also, if you're into the marketing, buy these now. They are going up in price, and they did get moved to the "we're never going to print again" reserve list. So Hatred is definitely a card to pick up because you will never see this effect in Magic again under the name Hatred. And then Tainted Remedy. This is basically the permanent version of False Cure. It states the same exact thing. If an opponent would gain that much life, they'd lose that much life instead. Which is effectively the same math as False Cure. It's just a permanent form for 1 more mana. Absolutely fantastic. Now let's talk about how we just absolutely kill people. Glacial Chasm is pretty much an endgame for most people. Because my cumulative upkeep can get insane, and then I can start swapping it to people's life totals. So Glacial Chasm will just slowly start killing people through the cumulative upkeep. Not only that, not being able to damage me and say finish me off on a lower life total absolutely is hard. It's very frustrating to play against in this deck. Most of the time you see these in lands decks, but in here it's great. Then we got the old Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood combo. Exquisite, basically this one says whenever you gain this much life, target opponent loses that much life, and this says whenever an opponent would lose life, you gain life. Absolutely kill each other out, and that's why we play with some of the fun tutors like Increasing Ambition and Plea for Guidance, because if we get these late game, we can go get this 2-piece combo that is arguably really strong with any of our extort effects, lost life effects, gain effects. These will trigger. This pretty much will lock a game into, like, if I do anything else, you guys lose. I would say it's probably the weakest kill con, but it is one of the ways that you can kill everybody. Repaying Kind is probably the way that I win the most in this deck. Each player's life total becomes the lowest life total among all players. Again, when we're going to things where we can go to, say, 0 life, with Selenia or other effects, being able to drop a Repaying Kind and send everybody else to 0 just ends the game out. There is no resolution for that. Stormherd. The one aggro build I have, absolutely hysterical. And what I love in this deck is oftentimes a Rakdos Charm can't even kill me for this stupid thing hitting the board. Usually just because I have different ways of gaining life, and so I can always overcome whatever Rakdos Charm is putting out against me with this one. You make so many damn Pegasus, it doesn't even matter. And another card I used to play in here that worked really well, Stormherd, that I took out because it was too good, was Vidalcan Orrery, so that any of this stuff could be played at flash speed. Anything was instant speed was absolutely great. That was a card I dropped out of here recently because it was, I think it was one of the things that was making this deck a little too oppressive for high power casual. Exsanguinate, absolutely great. Each opponent loses X life, you gain that life. And then the same thing of Debt to the Deathless, but they lose 2 times X, where you gain life equal to the life lost this way, for a little bit more on the devotion. So when we talk about this deck, we talk about Selenia, and the reason I wanted to go through all these cards is because there are a ton of combos. I mean, we talked about just a few as we were just going through it. But, you know, we've got everything we need to just win this game out. I mean, these things absolutely finish off a game with so many cards. But what makes this deck interesting compared to the other ones that I showed is that this deck doesn't look as powerful. But I would argue, outside of my actual CEDH ninjas, this is probably one of the most powerful decks in my collection. The only time I've ever lost with this deck is when somebody else can capitalize off the life loss that I'm causing other people, which doesn't happen as often as that would seem. And the faster it seems like somebody's deck is trying to move, the better off I am with this deck. Control decks are where this deck suffers a little bit more, which you don't really see that much in CDH. There's only 1 or 2 control decks out there. Most people are playing fast-paced aggro. So that's why I say it's funny, because this deck usually can contend with CDH really well, because if you're playing CDH aggro, and I slot in a couple of the higher power ones like Vampiric Tutor, Diabolic Demonic, and say fucking Vidalcan Orrery, Glacial Chasm can be a real wet fart. And it is definitely usually one of my first go-to tutors for this deck. It's just obscenely powerful. Really locks the game down and puts myself in the driver's seat for this deck. But again, when we're talking about all the different types of life swapping we can do, to different types of doubling our life totals that we can do, and that's just through those cards. You know, we can regain life lost. We can give other people regain life lost. We can give other people life. Smaller ways of gaining life. And into, again, being able to just manipulate other people's life totals, on top of being able to drain ourselves at any time possible. This deck gets very scary. And again, it's one that's really hard contextually. I wanted to go through it so that you guys aren't just taking my word for this. But this deck right here does not look good on the surface. It does not. But the bullshit that it can pull off, I would never play in mids. I would never throw a mid player against this deck. I barely throw high level games into this deck. 3 of the CDH games I played with on the server, I have absolutely just obliterated people with this deck, because this is my weakest CDH deck. Because I think ninjas are cheesy, even though I enjoy playing them. This is kind of the fun one that I have, because the only time I ever really get to play this deck fairly is in CDH games. I have 4 play groups that I play with here in the town that I live in, and I'm banned from playing this shit. I got kicked out of a store for making CDH players salty on this deck. Because of the way it functions, because of the effects that you have, and really what it comes down to is the optimization. There's no card in this deck that can't work with another card. You know, again, you can take something stupid like Wall of Shards, and as it gets ignored, suddenly this Tainted Remedy that doesn't look good makes it a win con. And one of these 2 cards has to go away, or everybody's going to lose. You know, when you talk about taking something like Exquisite Archangel, that suddenly can become a kill card with Sanguine Bond to a player. Because if I go to 0 and this exiles, when I go back to 40 life, that is considered a gain of life by the rules. So that will trigger Sanguine Bond to deal 40 damage to someone. You know, and that is the same thing when you want to talk about, what pile is it sitting around in? It's not in that one, I think it's in this one, yeah. When you're talking about Tainted Sigil. Tainted Sigil plays with Sanguine Bond. That will kill someone. And when you're talking about doing stupid ass board wipes, or say you want to block and kill something with a Wall of Blood, or board wipe, or lower everyone's life total to 0 with yours, and then activate the Tainted Sigil, or use Wall of Blood, or use Selenia. These all can combo into the Sanguine Bond through this. When you want to talk about any of the life swapping things, any of these things that net me life will trigger Sanguine Bond. There are so many ways to kill people with each card in this deck. I could sit here and do an entire deck breakdown for 3 hours talking about all the different combos and routes through this deck. And that is when we talk about optimization. And optimization is, in my opinion, the one thing, if you want to have high power or CDH, or you want to look at, is something a high power CDH, you want to look at this optimization. Because this is where it starts affecting things. These kind of combo routes are where you can see different deck styles starting to come into play. If a Glacial Chasm kills me with Exquisite Archangel and Sanguine Bond is on the field, that can end up killing someone. You exsanguinate or debt to the Deathless and you don't have enough to kill someone fully, Sanguine Bond will finish them off. Your Repaying Kinds can absolutely, with a life swap of Tainted Sigil, can kill someone. There are so many lines in this deck, just sitting here and playing with a collection of 10 cards at my hands here. Well, I've still got 40 other cards up here that combo off together. So again, this is one of those things that when you want to talk about looking at the power level of a deck and you're wondering what makes a difference going from mids to highs, this is what it is. It's understanding the inner nature of what a commander can do with optimization of cards. This is the hardest thing to teach someone, because for me to teach them why this deck is high power, they'd have to play against it. They'd have to sit there and analyze it for hours on end without playing against it. And that is one of the things that is the hardest thing to communicate to people. Now we're going to get into a little bit more on some easy ways to ascertain a power level and have an idea of what a power level deck is if you want a quick way of doing it. But I do like to show this deck because this is a great example of a deck that gets rated oftentimes from anywhere to a 4 to a 6, and you should never rate this kind of deck that low, because the optimization within this deck is scary, and you never want to let somebody with this kind of deck play in mids. I would never play this deck against anyone less than high, unless they were running their mouth and I needed to prove a point. So this deck check isn't necessarily meant to be an all end all. It's just an example of a deck that doesn't look powerful but actually has a very high power due to its optimization. This can happen with any decks. This can happen with aggros. This can happen with any combo decks. It can happen with control. Taigam's another one that oftentimes looks mid but ends up being more high powered. So it's, you know, this is just meant to be an example. In the next video we'll talk a little bit more about like the nitty-gritty mathematics of looking at a deck's power level. But from a builder standpoint and from someone who's looking through a deck, these are things that I often am going to look for. I may see powerful cards, but I'm not necessarily ever going to chalk them up as just powerful cards. You know, I'm not going to rate your deck as high just because you're playing, you know, Primal Vigor, Parallel Lives, and Doubling Season. Those things aren't necessarily going to mean that your deck is high powered.